All right, 2013 Toyota Sienna needs rear brakes done, and I've got it jacked up, got the jack stand under it, and we're ready to take this side apart and do the brakes on it. And so I got it apart and I looked here, and the rotor is fine. So we're just going to go ahead and do just the pads and it'll be just fine. We are just going to remove these 14mm bolts back here to remove the caliper. So we're not going to take this mounting bracket off. If you were going to take the mounting bracket off, there are two bolts in the back. If you can see this here, there's one here and then one at the bottom that you would undo, remove to take that whole bracket off. So if you're going to do that, you could just go ahead and do that without worrying about removing the caliper. It's a little bit easier just to remove the caliper though, and it's not that hard. The caliper, there's a 14mm here and a 14mm at the bottom that we're going to remove, and then that caliper comes right off. So that's what we're going to do now, is we're just going to remove the caliper. But if, like I said, if you're doing the rotor, then you have this at the top and then another one at the bottom that will allow that whole bracket to come off so that the rotor can slide out. All right, here's everything that we're going to need to do this job. There's the new brake pads and the clips, and then these small clips here are the, call them the squealers or the warning clips, that when your brake pad starts to get close to being worn down, that makes contact with the rotor and makes a horrible noise so that you know something's wrong before the rotor can be destroyed or before your brakes fail. And then these clips, you'll see where we replace those as we're going along. And then we have the C-clamp to compress the piston and the caliper. And I have a 14mm socket, a 17mm. The 17mm you would use if you're going to replace the rotor and remove the entire bracket. We're not going to do that, but I thought I would have it here anyway. And of course, with every job, you always need a flat blade screwdriver. And I don't care what it is, something always comes up where you need a flat blade screwdriver, and we'll use that in several places. We have the ratchet, which we are not going to use. And I'll show you why as we go along. We have the 14mm end wrench, which we are going to use, and the 17mm, which we probably are going to use too, and I will show you why as we go along, even though the only bolts we're taking out are 14mm. Okay, and it doesn't have to be a 17mm for what we're going to use it for. It's just like it to be a little bigger than the 14mm. You could try and get a socket on here. The issue with that is you have this shock that's right in the way. So to get a socket on there is really tough. So this needs to be done with an end wrench, which can be a little bit difficult, which is why we have the 17mm that we're going to use here also. And we just put that on there and see how much extra leverage that gives us. That just gives us a breaker on there. Okay. If you saw what I did there, you take the box end, put it over the open end like that, and then that acts as a cheater on there. You probably already know that, but I thought I'd show it just in case. All right, then we're going to loosen the bottom one. Generally, once these are loose, they're just finger tight. They come right out. Set those aside, and then that just comes off. We'll set that up out of the way. And did I mention we always need a screwdriver for every job? And you can see This pad is actually still has some life in it. These also don't have the warnings on. Yeah, and there's still some life left in that one also. Okay, we got those out. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pop these clips out of here. And pay attention to the configuration of how these go. There are two different clips. There's one that goes on the bottom, one that goes on the top. And if you look at this spring steel piece going in here, it comes from here and flares out that direction, and it'll do the same on the top. Okay, so we'll come in here, flare out that direction, so we need to replace them in the same configuration. And I'll just show you here. I'm going to do the same thing. If you have this bracket where you take it completely off, you can get a wire brush in here and kind of clean this up. This isn't super critical, but I'm just going to take my screwdriver and just kind of get the bulk of that cleared off. Just kind of do that. I can do. Okay. Yeah, that's better. All right. Okay, now I'm going to put a little grease down in those. It's always good to coat anywhere you're going to have metal on metal just to stop any potential noises. And on these clips, you could probably skip this step, but I'm going to put just a little. Anyway, just put it in there. Let me go a little bit. And we want to try as hard as we can not to get this grease on the pads themselves. Like I said, if you get a little bit, it's not super critical. Okay, and now if you remember, you have this configuration, this configuration. This one's going to go on the bottom, and this one is going to go on the top, okay? Same on the back. That one's going to be the bottom so it flares that direction. And the top. Okay, now these are going to go like this. That one's going to go like that, and then the one on the back is going to go the same direction, only that way. We want these warning clips, or these squealers, to be on the top. Okay. And you can put a little grease on these if you want. Yeah, it's not critical, but just kind of a rule of thumb on brakes. When you have metal on metal somewhere, go ahead and do it. But this probably isn't going to matter. Probably isn't going to make any noise. Okay, and then this is going to go on here, so that this, if you can see this portion here, is on the same side as the pad material. So as the pad wears, that little piece there is going to rub on the rotor and make the noise and warn you that your brakes are getting low. Okay, so that goes like that. And then that goes in like that. Okay, before we do this now, we are going to grease these areas in here and here. Try not to get it all over our hands so we don't spread it all over everything. And just anywhere we're going to have metal on metal. Now this grease A lot of times your brake shoes or your brake pads are going to come with a packet of grease in it. If they don't, you can buy a packet at your local auto parts for, I don't know, $1.50 or something. Okay, we've got that lubed. And let's go ahead and get these put in. If I mentioned enough that every job needs a screwdriver. Okay, there we go. And we're just going to do the same thing now on the back. Like that. And we'll coat all these surfaces where we're going to have metal on metal. Okay. All right, there we go. We got it. Can take a little bit of work to get that one. Okay, now, where I mentioned anywhere we've got metal on metal, which is right here, where that piston, that caliper, is going to come on and rub. You want to kind of grease that up, front and back. Okay, now what's left to do is to compress the piston. We're going to take the C-clamp and we're going to insert it into this piston, tighten it down. There are other ways to do this. C-clamp is the cheapest option. Usually have them around. Now we just want to make sure I get this boot that's around here pushed down in, just so it doesn't get pinched. Okay, should be good. All right, we got those back in. We've got them greased up. Now let's just put the caliper back on, and then we're ready to go. All right, easy enough. Okay, now these tighten into these slide pins here, and so when you start torquing these, if this is just spinning, you can get another 14mm end wrench and put it on this side. Generally, it's not a problem. And it's not a problem in this case. All right, let's get these torqued. Okay, those are all torqued. Now, if you are going to replace the rotors on this, there are a couple things that you need to consider. And one of them is that it's got to slide off over this. If you can see how corroded this is, So what you're going to need to do is probably clean this off until you can see down in where this, you can get to where you can see where that. You can see where that slides over that. Okay, so we go ahead and clean that. I'm not going to keep cleaning it, but you can see what you would do. This has a lot of road salt built up in there. And then this would just come off easy, right? Well, it's not always so easy. That's the problem. And what's happened here is whoever, it looks like these rotors have been replaced. Whoever put these rotors on, this is an access hole here, which is supposed to be wide open. And on some of these axles under there, there's an access place where you line this up with so you have clear access. They didn't do that on this, which is probably why they didn't put the grommets, because these are supposed to have a grommet in here also. You can see this is supposed to be an access hole. And on some of these on this axle, well, on this hub, it's not an axle on these, on this hub back there, there will be a slotted spot where this is supposed to line up with. Okay, and the reason for that is then there's a star adjustment in here that you can find an access, and you can take a screwdriver and you can adjust that and back it off so those shoes aren't tied against this anymore, and that will come off. Now, if we're going to do that with this one, that's going to have to be drilled out or something if we need to do that, because they didn't line this up. They probably just blindly put these on, didn't pay attention to what they're doing. On some, it doesn't matter. There is nothing like that. You have access no matter where you put it. But unfortunately on this one, now there is no access. Okay. Now, if you're going to do that, if I'm remembering correctly, if you're looking from the back of the vehicle, I believe that star has to turn, a star adjuster has to turn counterclockwise from the back of the vehicle. So with that being the case, if you had access on here, you would line it up with that. You would find where it is, you'd put the screwdriver in there. In order for it to go counterclockwise, you would be pushing it up. On the other side, in order for it to go counterclockwise, you're pushing it down. So driver's side, you would be pushing it down. Passenger side, you would be pushing it up. That could then back those shoes off so that then this will come off easily. Now, in the situation like this, where you don't actually have access, you can try and just work it, and bang it and try and pry it off, and hopefully it will come without having to adjust those. You can do that a lot of times. You don't always need to adjust those. So hopefully if these need to be replaced, those will come off without too much trouble. Otherwise, we'll have to do something a little more drastic, but hopefully I'm not the one that has to worry about it. Okay, hope that's clear. If you have any questions or any comments on anything, please go ahead and post them, and I will read the comments and I will respond to them. And I am not above suggestions. If you see something that I'm doing that you feel like could be done better, by all means, that's how we get better at things. I've done a lot of things throughout my life that I think I'm doing about the best way I can, and somebody comes and gives me a suggestion. I'm like, wow, why didn't I think of that? So in any of my videos, don't worry, I'm not going to be offended. And that's how we learn from each other, and that's part of the purpose of doing these things. Now I'll just lower it, torque the lug nuts, and we're done. Thanks for watching.